Welcome back to Off the Beaten Path. It's cutting season, and what we have been doing is starting a lot of fig cuttings, and they're starting to bud and they're starting to root. But what I wanted to show you is something that I don't think has been covered very much, if at all, and that is trying to identify fig varieties, or at least fig families, by just looking at the bark. Because this time of year we have no leaves, we have no fruit. It's very difficult to identify different varieties, or at least families. But you can kind of get good, especially after you've done several thousand of these, you get good at being able to at least identify. It's not 100%, but what I have right here is, this is second year wood, and as you can see, at that point, second year wood just looks like wood. It's pretty grayish. It's not very identifiable. You really can't do much. But first year wood gives you a little bit more of a clue as to what something might be. The very first one I wanted to show are the so-called Mount Etna figs, and these are kind of boring. But if you look, there's not a lot of light here. Maybe I'll bring it over to the light a little bit. Is just simply that they have kind of a grayish green bark, tiny little white spots on them, usually a rough bark. The best way to identify Mount Etna, though, is of course the leaves, because they're almost hairy. They're very rough. But that's a lot of fig trees in the Northeast would be the so-called Mount Etna fig. So they have kind of a green gray bark with little white spots. It's kind of rough, but that's pretty identifiable. One of the textbook, this is an EBT, or an English brown turkey type, and these are the easiest ones to identify in my opinion. They usually have a very ugly surface to them with little spots. They all have it, whether it's something like Olympian, Soda Sicilian, Sister George. All of these have that characteristic pattern, Nexo, but you'll always see it. So anytime I see this bark, I know exactly that it comes from the EBT, or English brown turkey type family. The next one is very textbook. It's got its own little thing. It's got shiny green bark, very few, it's very smooth. Smith is just like that. Smith and Texas BA1, which you could argue are the same. These have that. If you wash them off, they give you a nice sheen to them. The problem with, of course, these types, or the Smith types, is just simply that they keep this green color. They don't really lignify very quickly, and they grow pretty fast. So when you see this type of wood, there's not much of a winter jacket on this. So they do take on a lot of winter damage if you don't protect them. So that's the Smith. The Adriatic is very similar. It is green. It doesn't have quite the shine on it, but it does have a green wood, and so you could almost get confused with Smith's wood and the Adriatic wood. And at least genetically, they're pretty similar. Like Smith is, of course, has a little level up in terms of flavor, but I believe that at one point it might have been part of the Adriatic family. The last one is a little bit different. Still has a green bark, usually has some white dots as well. That's the Adriano family, like Dr. Gawadi, Battaglia green, Rockaway green. A lot of these Adriatics have that greenish bark, but they also have almost like a little bit of a light tan to them, especially the older ones. When they're real young, they're green. So those are at least 5. There's other families, like the Peter's honey also is somewhat identifiable. But what I wanted to do is just sort of test you on what you just saw, just to see if you can identify, just by looking at the bark of something, an unknown, that I'm going to pull out. So this is the first quiz question. If you look at this bark, maybe if you noticed, just from when I did the survey of those different types, you can kind of note this is an ugly, rough bark with some white spots on it, which is pretty indicative of the EBTs, or the English brown turkey types. They all have it, whether it's Olympian, Sister George, Nexo, Faymarn, Gratz. So a lot of these English brown turkey types have this bark. Second quiz question. This one is also pretty straightforward. If you notice, there's not really a lot of green on it. This is sort of the gray-green appearance, which is very indicative of the Mount Etna types. The Mount Etna types don't usually get very green. Even when they're young, they put on the brown pretty quickly. They don't stay green very long. And that rough kind of outer coat, I think, which helps with winter protection a little bit more than something that has the green bark, which I don't think is very thick. These are pretty textbook, very common in the Northeast. Third example, this one's, now we're getting a little bit trickier because we are looking at kind of a green coloration. But you do see a little bit of white spots in there. Usually it's a little bit brighter in terms of the green color, but it's there. It's shiny, but not too shiny. This is what we would call the Atriano family. These are things that would include Rockaway green, Battaglia green. There's certainly a lot of these green ischia. Like a lot of these have that textbook color, and once you add that with leaves and especially fruit, the identification process is a little easier. So the last one I have, this is sort of a 50-50 guess. One of these is Smith and the other is Adriatic. Remember that I did say that I believe that there is some similarities because I think that at one point genetically they're pretty close. But if you notice, the one at the top is a little shinier, a little greener, doesn't have the little white spots or lenticels on them, so it's its own color, and because of that, like I mentioned, it just doesn't lignify very quickly because it grows so fast and it doesn't have a chance to really slow down before the end of our season anyway. So the one at the top is in fact Smith. The one below, that is an Adriatic type. So this is a quick survey just of the different types. There are many other types that I probably could have dug up, but at this point in the season there's not a lot of cuttings that I have that are not already in dirt. But I wanted to say that this is not a foolproof kind of identification method. It's kind of a tertiary way to help identify, especially when there's no other information, any other things to help it identify it. But it's just kind of characteristic of some of these varieties. That's a great help. It's like I said, it's not 100%. All it does is just give you a clue as to maybe what family the fig belongs to. Thank you for watching.